Tonight, is it possible? The admiral in charge predicts the oil leak could be contained by Monday, and biologists move fast to rescue the next generation of turtles. I'm Katie Couric. Also tonight, a CBS journalist tells a harrowing tale of being captured by the Taliban as he went hunting for Osama bin Laden.
Later, I realized it was a suicide mission.
And the man who's transforming villagers in the developing world into readers and writers.
From CBS News World Headquarters in New York, this is the CBS Evening News with Katie Couric.
Good evening, everyone. Could we finally be reaching a turning point in the disaster in the Gulf? On day 81, the man in charge of the federal response, Admiral Thad Allen, said that if all goes well, the leaking oil could be contained by Monday. Now, it doesn't mean the leak would be plugged, not yet anyway. In the meantime, the spill continues to grow by more than 1 million gallons a day. Mark Strassman is in Port Fourchon, Louisiana tonight. Mark, what's the latest there?
Short and simple, Katie. The latest is that Washington is pushing BP hard. There's 8 good days of weather ahead. Take advantage of it and get this mess under control. With 2 major steps over the weekend, finally, BP may have containing this leak under control. By early next week, its floating city in the Gulf could be recovering 80,000 barrels of oil a day, a 3-fold jump, and more than the current spill estimate, 60,000 barrels a day.
What we're all trying to do, everyone associated with this response, is do everything we can to stop the flow and contain all of it.
Sometime today, BP hopes to hook its 3rd containment ship, the Helix Producer, to the runaway well with a detachable riser pipe. By Tuesday, the Helix could be recovering 20,000 more barrels a day. As soon as tomorrow, BP will remove the well's temporary containment cap and replace it with a larger, tighter, more permanent one called a sealing cap. But that switch could take 3 to 4 days, and unless the Helix is operational, another 15,000 barrels will gush into the Gulf.
There'd be a multi-day period there while we're putting the new containment cap on, where there would be some exposure to hydrocarbons going into the environment.
For toxicologists, that's one more worry. After 11 weeks of leaking oil, controlled burns, and toxic dispersants, what's the impact on cleanup crews and coastline residents? 200 people have been hospitalized so far. Roughly 40% of the leaked oil evaporates, and once in the air, southerly winds push it to shore. These face masks are recommended for some workers cleaning up the thickest oil. But in this heat, almost nobody wears them.
If the exposure goes on for long periods of time, some of these chemicals have also been linked to long-term neurologic problems or cancer.
So in Louisiana's spill zone, the EPA has installed 9 emergency air quality stations. Some dust and particle readings are slightly elevated, a seasonal trend not related to this spill. Still,
we just want to do real-time analysis monitoring to figure out exactly what is in the air.
BP's new sealing cap could also get an answer to an elusive number. How much oil is really gushing out of that well every day? Katie?
Mark Strassman. Mark, thanks very much. From Louisiana, we head east to a delicate operation. Biologists are rescuing turtle eggs, carefully transporting them from the contaminated Gulf Coast of Florida to the Kennedy Space Center on the Atlantic side. Here's Kelly Kobiea.
Just kick it straight. Perfect. Perfect.
For 90 minutes, a group of scientists and volunteers slowly carve away heavy, wet sand, carefully removing 107 loggerhead turtle eggs one by one. Each is the size of a ping pong ball, soft, leathery, and very delicate. They mark the top of the egg so it stays in the same position they found it. Even a small turn could rip the membrane inside and kill the embryo.
Make sure if the eggs are stable.
It's almost an archaeological process. They're very fragile. You can't squeeze them too tightly.
It's a rescue they plan to repeat for the rest of the summer, digging 80,000 eggs out of 800 nests from Orange Beach, Alabama to Panama City, Florida.
If they encounter that toxic oil, they're going to die.
Period.
They will die.
No chance.
They will die.
Instead, they're being FedExed to Florida's East Coast, a 7-hour road trip. But speed isn't nearly as important as a smooth ride. This truck has been set up to give the eggs the best possible chance for survival. You can see they're raised from the floor to allow air to circulate. These blue discs give them just an extra touch of stability, and sensors are constantly monitoring the temperature. Loggerhead turtles have a tough time surviving the best of conditions. Only 60% of hatchlings make it to the water. Just 1 in 1,000 lives long enough to reproduce, starting when they're 25 years old. And they're not the only ones in danger. Thousands of miles away in Panama, Dawn, a 900-pound leatherback turtle, laid her eggs in June.
Pack it down, baby girl, pack it down.
She, like thousands of other sea turtles, is now swimming home to the Gulf and straight for oil. If she gets into trouble, can you rescue her?
Probably not, and that's a very concerning thing.
But they're hopeful they can help the next generation.
So those rescued eggs will stay in those small containers for the next 7 to 10 days until the turtles hatch. At that point, the newborns will be taken to an Atlantic Ocean beach and released on Florida's east coast, far from where the oil is now. Katie?
And Kelly, a viewer sent us a question via Twitter tonight. Has BP established any type of wildlife fund to help with the animals?
Well, the money BP makes from the oil recovered from this spill will go toward the National Fish and Wildlife Foundation. BP has already made a $5 million donation, and you can donate as well. To find out their contact information and about other organizations helping wildlife in the Gulf, you can check our website, cbsnews.com.
Kelly Kobayea in Port St. Joe, Florida tonight. Kelly, thank you. And still ahead here on the CBS Evening News, can you imagine a library with no books? He couldn't, and he set out to change the world. But up next, kidnapped by the Taliban, how a CBS journalist faced death day after day. A woman's life hung in the balance today during a hostage standoff in China. A robbery suspect cornered by the police threatened to kill her with a pair of scissors. Then a plainclothes police officer stepped forward and threw the suspect some water. While he was distracted, the officer shot and killed him. The hostage survived and was taken to a hospital. Now, just imagine being held by terrorists, your life in jeopardy for days on end. It happened to CBS journalist Jerry Van Dyke. He went looking for the scoop of a lifetime, but instead was kidnapped by the Taliban. Van Dyke has written a book about his experience, and tonight he tells his incredible story to David Martin.
Jerry Van Dyke, on the day in 2008, he was released after 45 days as a prisoner of the Taliban.
And that's how they do that.
Jerry Van Dyke today, talking about his ordeal.
You're constantly afraid the door is going to open up, and then that door is going to be a man with a black turban, and he's going to hold a rifle, and he's going to take you outside, and they're going to cut off your head.
Van Dyke worked frequently as a freelancer for CBS News, using his decades of experience in Afghanistan and his native garb to go places other journalists could not. To the scene of the infamous friendly fire incident which killed former NFL star Pat Tillman, for instance. In the winter of 2008, he set out for the ultimate prize, find Osama bin Laden.
I felt I could do it, but later I realized it was a suicide mission.
His plan was to meet up with a Taliban commander, something he had done before, and be passed along to more senior leaders until he reached the top. But even before he crossed over the border into the tribal areas of Pakistan, where bin Laden is believed to be hiding, Van Dyke was betrayed.
I saw a man pointing no more than a little further back from where you are, pointing a rocket-propelled grenade launcher at my head, and his eyes were as black as coal, filled with hate. I'm dead.
CBS News enlisted Michael Semple to find out what Van Dyke's kidnappers wanted.
I think their intent was to get hold of a high-profile American and sell them.
So this was a ransom operation.
The border area between Afghanistan and Pakistan is somewhere where this has been an industry for years.
A former Irish diplomat, Semple had such good contacts with the Taliban, he was able to get one of Van Dyke's kidnappers on the phone. While Van Dyke waited for his execution, Semple negotiated. Until one night, one of the kidnappers came into Van Dyke's cell.
He said, "Congratulations. You have escaped death."
To this day, Van Dyke doesn't know how much, if any, money changed hands. CBS News kept everything secret.
The fact that the story stayed out of the media was one of the factors which kept Jerry alive.
Had another more extreme group found out about Van Dyke, Semple says, it might have snatched him away and used him for propaganda, as with the infamous execution of Daniel Pearl.
We were all thinking, how on earth can we ensure that it does not become another Daniel Pearl?
Van Dyke survived and came away with some hard-earned intelligence about where bin Laden might be hiding.
I came away with the belief that bin Laden is not hiding in the tribal areas.
He believes al-Qaeda's leader and his bodyguards are just too big and too notorious to hide in such an unpopulated region.
Every tribal leader told me that. They also said that bin Laden is too big to hide.
One thing for sure, wherever bin Laden is, Jerry Van Dyke didn't even come close. David Martin, CBS News, New York.
The Justice Department said today it will investigate the shooting death of an unarmed black man by a white police officer in Oakland, California. The officer, Johannes Meserly, was convicted yesterday of involuntary manslaughter. Anger that he wasn't convicted of murder led to rioting last night and more than 80 arrests. Today, the former officer, who could get 4 years in prison, apologized, saying he'll always live and breathe with the victim's memory. In Philadelphia, divers recovered the bodies of 2 Hungarian tourists missing since a sightseeing boat collided with a barge on Wednesday. 35 others on the duck boat were rescued shortly after the accident, and today the boat was pulled out of the water. Elsewhere in Philadelphia today, a very different scene as the city celebrated an anniversary. It was 50 years ago today that South Philly native Chubby Checker introduced the world to the twist. The song shot to #1, and today, a half-century later, Chubby Checker, now 68, was twisting again like he did that summer, the summer of 1960. We end tonight with one of the most powerful forces on earth, one that can inspire us and take us anywhere we imagine. It's called a book. Seth Doane has the story of a man who believes books have the power to lift a child out of poverty in tonight's American Spirit.
His drawings poured out on paper.
Drawing makes me enjoy that kid in me.
Her stories filled diaries.
When I write on my own, it's my soul which is giving out.
Until the once private passions of author Manju Gupta and illustrator Mahol Novodit met on the pages of this children's book, published by Room to Read. This nonprofit is nurturing new literary talent in the developing world and has printed more than 400 original books in 22 languages.
There are a lot of children's books in English. How is it to read a book in Hindi?
I try to read in English, 10-year-old Surav Kumar tells me, but Hindi is much easier for me.
You can see they're reading Mahul and Manju's book in this school library in Delhi. After all, the primary purpose behind Room to Read was not to develop local talent, but to establish libraries in the developing world.
It's an idea that was sparked a decade ago when John Wood, then a Microsoft executive, was on vacation in Nepal. He was stunned to find a school library without a single children's book.
And I asked the headmaster, what's the deal? Why is the library empty? And he said, we're too poor to afford education, but until we have education, we'll always be poor.
That realization led Wood to leave his job to start Room to Read, which is establishing a new library every 4 hours, 10,000 so far. The project is now also nurturing local literary talent, like Manju, a former school principal.
The expression also slightly changes.
She translated this book and wrote another about a turban that goes on an adventure.
My potential is made use of for the right purpose.
Must feel good.
It's the best thing. It's the best thing.
Finally, I draw the characters.
And Mahul got his first chance to share his work too.
To see a work get published, you feel a lot of confidence, like what you are doing is actually good.
There's been global movements against slavery. There's a global movement against malaria. I think we need to have a global movement to say that every single child deserves a chance to learn to read.
It's John Wood's vision, Manju's words, and Mehul's pictures together, filling the pages of a book and the minds of another generation. Seth Doan, CBS News, New Delhi.
And speaking of books, To Kill a Mockingbird celebrates its 50th anniversary this weekend. The novel by Harper Lee has sold 30 million copies, and the 1962 movie starring Gregory Peck won 3 Oscars.
Well, it would be sort of like shooting a mockingbird, wouldn't it?
I'll have more on the enduring power of this acclaimed novel this weekend on Sunday morning. Until then, I'm Katie Couric. Have a great weekend. Good night.